Tattoo artists, what was your worst mistake and how did the client react? When I was but a wee baby piercer, I worked at the biggest shop in my city, which had 14 artists and 2 piercers. It was the peak of the stamp trend. I'm still so sad that was the nickname. Antlers was so much better. So when a super tiny 18-year-old black woman came in and wanted her name on her lower back with a flower, it was just normal. An older white male tattoo artist took her to pick a font. It took a minute, even though back then everyone went with Edwardian, but they came out. I had her do paperwork and he got the drawing finished. She okayed the design, she okayed the stencil, she sat for the tattoo, loved it, tipped him and left. 2 hours later, she called back, sobbing, saying we ruined her life. The counter girl told her to come in and we would fix whatever was wrong. Tattoo comes back with 2 gigantic, angry friends who are ready to freak out. We finally see the tattoo. Her name was Whitney. The N got left out in the font process, so huge across her lower back it said Whitey. It was covered for free and with many apologies with 3 giant purple roses. The tattoo artist was so messed up that he didn't even come in for a week. It was an honest mistake, but it was the worst spelling error I've seen. And for those wondering why people would get a tattoo of their name on their lower back, plenty of people did 10 years ago. It was kind of a go-to thing for a first tattoo when you didn't know what you wanted, but people figured their name wouldn't change. I never liked it, and I think dudes getting their last name across their upper back is the same deal. My favorite stamp ever went on the lead singer of my band at the time. She was dating a tattoo artist, and they came up with the ultimate stamp. It was a trophy with a hand doing the shocker at the top, 2 boxing gloves draped around it, and a giant banner that said, "Hit it like a champ." It was glorious and amazing, but she was 20, and all I could think was the old lady thought, what happens when you're 40 and bend down to give your kid a juice box at soccer practice? I was wrong, though. She's singing for another band now and has a great life in New York City. Still punk AF. Oh, yeah. I just couldn't help but chuckle. Definitely the worst spelling error I've read on here. Story 2. I had a client who decided he wanted lettering on his forearms, sayings in Greek and Hebrew. He doesn't speak either language, but he had one of his friends double-check the spelling before he sent the references to me. Came in, we did the tattoos, pretty simple appointment. Fast forward to a couple of weeks later, I get a message from my client about the tattoo that was done in Hebrew. He owns a small construction restoration company and has a few Israeli guys who work for him. Apparently, they were giving him a lot of headaches for his Hebrew tattoo. He originally thought they were just messing with him because it was spelled wrong. The font he had chosen off a quick Google search essentially changed a couple of the letters, kind of like the difference between an F and a T, making it a completely different word. We ended up being able to fix it pretty easily and had a good laugh about it, but definitely be aware when you're getting tattoos in a language you and your artist don't speak. Best advice I could give anyone, as someone who has lived abroad and seen too many mess-ups in multiple languages, study the language and script first. Knowing even a bit about how letters are formed and different writing types can help so much. Grammar is important as well. I lived in Japan and saw so many weird things written in English because people didn't know the proper word order. Kanji tattoos are worse. Not only not knowing what kanji can be put together, but how the writing strokes go. If the tattoo artist has no idea, it's going to look backwards. There is a directionality to how it is written. And if you don't know how, it's going to look like an illiterate artist drew a picture of what he thinks writing looks like. Yeah, I never understand why people get words in other languages tattooed on them. It's like you're just asking for trouble. Story 3. A few years ago, I was tattooing a client who had apparently lost a bet. His buddies were allowed to tattoo something behind his shoulder as long as it wasn't offensive. Turns out the guy drew up a design of a leprechaun retching on a book. Sure, why not? Everyone was sober and they were paying pounds up front. Easy work, the drawing was really simple, and the shading was easier than I thought it'd be. And turns out everyone liked it, except the guy with the tattoo of a leprechaun retching on a book. He picked at the scab, trying to get rid of it, completely taking it from bad to worse. Comes in about 10 days later, demanding a refund of money he didn't pay, or the studio, not me, cover it up. Nope, management said you signed up for it right in your own mind and then damaged it yourself. Personally, I was yelled at and told never tattoo anyone like that. It only works in television series or film. Did I make a mistake? Yes and no. The lesson here is don't get involved in others' drama when permanent body markings are involved. I mean, come on, honestly, sounds like an expected reaction from the type of person who would actually take a bet that would force him to get a tattoo. A leprechaun retching on a book. Story 4. Apprentice here? Nothing major, but bad karma on one tattoo from the get-go that absolutely floored my confidence for a bit. Only recently did my first ever small tattoo on a client. Had to do a small range of flash ideas that I felt comfortable with. Had my mentor, who, judging by some other stories I'm very lucky to have, he's a sound dude, discuss with me beforehand my needle choices, placement technique, usual bits, and was ready to go. And everything felt ready. Midway through, my machine goes, it's brand new, my only one, managed to sort it out without much fuss, but in doing so, in my panic, I put the wrong needle size in the machine when it came to replacing it with a fresh one. I botched a line when I realized almost immediately the size difference. Change again, nerves are shot, back at it, brand new foot pedal breaks. Replace it with an old one from my mentor. It breaks too, power pack goes out, and that was brand new too. I panic, spill my ink, practically had a meltdown in my brain about what had happened. Carried on with another artist's equipment, apologizing as calmly as I can to my client. Mentor calmed my nerves, and I ended up pulling it out the bag and doing a job I was happy with somehow, but most importantly, the client loved it. Anyway, not a crazy bad story, but as an apprentice who's also a fairly confident dude, I have never felt so absolutely floored in my life. Tattooing someone is monumentally stressful when all doesn't go to plan. I can't wait to do more and progress, but what a time for bad things to happen. My mentor helped me sort out all my gear afterward and was super cool, sat with me and said something like,
"Well, of all the times and all the things that could have gone wrong, that was the absolutely perfect one for them. Nerve-wracking stuff."
Story 5. I had a client email me asking for a 4-letter acronym. I don't do freehand script, so I put the letters into a font generator and sent him back some options. He picked the one he liked best, and we set an appointment date. On the day of his session, I showed him the acronym again, and we chose a size. I placed a stencil, and he approved it, and I got started. Midway through the tattoo, I asked him what the letters stood for, and he told me, and my heart stopped. The letters were in the wrong order. The middle two were swapped. I ran to the shop computer to check my email, and sure enough, in his original email he'd sent me, they'd been correct. I had typed them into the font generator wrong, but to be fair, he had seen them several times since then and didn't notice my mistake. I spent the rest of the session covering them up with another design he'd had as a backup tattoo idea, and I didn't charge him. But it was a good learning experience for me to always ask what initials and acronyms stand for ahead of time to make sure I get them in the right order. Story 6. Artist here. Spelling mistakes are common in the industry. I'm the first to tell a customer that I'm a terrible speller, so they had better check everything before the needle hits the skin. I once had a customer who had to call his wife and confirm how they spelled their daughter's name before we got started, and it's a good thing he did. But oftentimes the worst mistakes are stray lines, most often caused by flinching, or missing details, usually a result of losing part of a stencil during the tattoo process. I've heard of clients being fairly crushed by tattoo mistakes, but generally they can be corrected with a little creativity and skill. My worst mistake was made when I was learning to tattoo. As an apprentice, I had to take what I could get when it came to practicing. Thank goodness for dumb friends. I tattooed over some very thin skin for the first time, inside the elbow, and blew out a couple of the lines. She didn't say much about it at the time, but I knew she was angry. Luckily, I was eventually able to shade over the area and cover up the mistake when we added to the tattoo. Story 7. Did my first one on an old schoolmate who was aware of my artistic abilities despite having never applied ink before, and he offered me his bag. I had 3 pros watching as I drew a geisha free-handed on his back while he was hunched over. When the design was laid out, he checked it in the mirror and was good with it, so I began lining it. The thing is, the other artist said it looked great, but unfortunately I was doing something else when he checked it, so I didn't notice just how messed up it really was. Anyway, I lined it up and we took a break. As he stood up while I was watching, my heart dropped as I witnessed the geisha's face droop into a palsied state on one side. He was leaning forward with his elbows on his knees while drawing it and so distorted the canvas. Now, this sounds bad, but I never really liked this guy too much. He originally wanted a bag full of so I didn't feel bad that when he went to look in the mirror, he lifted his shoulder to look at the tattoo, which normalized the proportions, and he said it looked awesome. Well, good then. Big lesson learned, though. I still have the occasional nightmare over it. And if you're enjoying the video so far, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 8. As other artists have said, none besides some blowouts and wonky lines that were fixable when I was a new artist. But I fixed some really messed up ones. Mostly spelling mistakes, some terrible ones. But I had to cover up one of a guy's son. The portrait was wonky and obviously done by a kitchen wizard. The worst part was that all the designs the scratcher did around it were for a girl. They were not approved by the client. The scratcher that did it thought it was a little girl and did all kinds of pinks and hearts and bows in the hair and around it. The worst part, he wrote Daddy's Girl. The lettering basically butted right up against the portrait on top and bottom, so just covering up the designs wasn't possible. It needed a full cover-up, which I would have recommended regardless because of the bad portrait by itself. So we covered it up with an approved design, and he came back to my shop for my version of the hyper-realistic portrait of his son that he wanted. Story 9. When I first opened my shop, I was super nervous about making mistakes, and those first few clients were a roller coaster of anxiety. Well, of course, one of my first clients came in and asked for a tattoo to be covered because another artist messed it up. The tattoo was meant to be a peanut riding a motorcycle. However, the tattoo artist screwed up and it looked like a Johnson riding a malformed motorcycle from hell. So I got to work covering it up with a new design. She asked for a raven to cover it up since I could color the raven in black and cover up the other artist's mistake. No problem. All good, right? Nope. The tattoo was in a super awkward position and the client wouldn't stop squirming. Eventually I finished and to my dismay, I noticed my mess up. I didn't cover the peanut part of the original tattoo properly and the raven looked like it had a little Johnson coming out of it. When she realized, she was angry and demanded it be fixed. The only solution I saw was to attach another smaller raven to the original one as a sort of chain link. The client now tells people that the tattoo is 2 chained ravens because, quote, our inner darkness must be chained. But we both know why she really got it. Ha, little Johnson man. Story 10. I misspelled forward. It was a line of script on the side of a foot and a last-minute addition to a couple other tattoos they were getting. I quickly knocked it together on Photoshop and nothing looked out of place. The client approved, so I made the stencil. The real mess-up is that I didn't ask them to spell check. I always ask them to spell check, except for this one time. The next day they came back and pointed out that forward isn't spelled forward. I do a lot of reading and I guess it didn't look wrong because I'm used to seeing it as the foreword of a book. I apologized profusely, feeling like a total and told them to pick at the scab of the extra E and the W while they were healing, to make it fade, and come back in 2 weeks. Fixing the O was easy, and I was able to turn the E and the W into a wide, loopy W, and add a bit of extra loops and flourish to other letters so that it looked totally fine in the end, albeit a bit stylized. She was happy in the end and still comes to get work from me. 10 years of tattooing and that one still haunts me. There have been other mistakes, but they're mostly the client's fault. Things like dads getting their children's birthdays wrong. Happens a lot, actually. Dude, I don't know what month your kid was born in. Call your wife. Also, bonus story, the guy who spells his kid's name wrong. I had him write their name down. Like, literally, he wrote it down. Bentley. I drew up a fun, custom script. He loved it. Put the stencil on him and had him check it out. I even told him to make sure everything was right. All good. Did the lining and had him check it out while we took a break. Loved it. Finished the shading, a drop shadow, etc. All finished. He's checking it out on the mirror, loves it, until I hear what about the E? What E? I replied in dismay. The E. Bentley has an E. So I show him what he had written down and he groans, oh man, I always mess that up. My wife is going to end me. So I sit down with the original drawing and manage to turn part of the L and the Y into an E, add another couple lines to reform the L and Y, and boom, Bentley. It worked out in the end and I felt like an absolute wizard, but dude, it's your kid's name and you didn't notice the spelling was wrong the 10 times you checked it out during the whole process? What a job. Story 11. My time has come. I had some really bad experiences in this shop, but this one was up there. Apologies for the very long story. This was during my apprenticeship. I had been tattooing for no more than 2 weeks and was very inexperienced. My mentor wanted me to participate in a $13 Friday, the 13th flash special coming up that week. I drew up a flash sheet full of designs that I was confident I could pull off with my limited experience. I spent the entire day beforehand prepping my station, gathering supplies, printing stencils and consent forms, cleaning the entire shop, etc. I decided to sleep on the shop floor that night so that in the morning I could buy the whole shop some fancy donuts from a nearby cafe and get back in time for the event. Right before it started, my mentor, who was also the shop owner, changed up the rules of the special. He announced on Instagram that people could bring in whatever small design they wanted to get done for $13. And I was suddenly being asked to draw and tattoo designs that I was fully unprepared to take on. The shop had one computer with Photoshop that we all had to take turns on to create designs, so our turnaround time slowed to a crawl. And I already tattooed slowly anyway since I was so green. The shop was overflowing with people and we had a wait list with literally over 100 names. Over the course of the day, I only managed to tattoo 6 or 7 people. I ended up working for 14 hours straight, didn't even have time to eat any of the donuts. And just as we were about to close up shop at 2 a.m., one girl walks in and asks if she can still get in on the special. She wants a butterfly. My mentor tells me to take care of it. I'm exhausted, but hey, you don't tell your mentor no. So I print the stencil and get started, and my hands just stop functioning. My wrists were so sore and cramped from working all day that I couldn't control the tattoo machine anymore. It was the strangest, most horrible feeling. I watched in horror as no matter how hard I tried to tame my gnarled hands, I just completely botched this girl's tattoo. Lines were all squiggly and off. I felt absolutely horrible. It looked horrendous. I called another artist to finish the tattoo for me and told the client that her tattoo was on the house. She left without saying much. We closed up shop after she left and I told the other artist to go home while I stayed behind and cleaned up. I cried as I cleaned. I made only enough money that day to cover the price of the stupid donuts. By the time I was done cleaning, it was 3:30 a.m. and still had to ride my bike a few miles home. I was so tired that I decided to spend a second night sleeping on the shop floor. I woke up early the next morning to ride home, and the rear wheel had been stolen off of my bike. I had to carry it 2 miles to the nearest bike shop and spend $90 on a new wheel, tire, and cassette. And I thought that was the end of that nightmare until a week later, I'm at home and get a call from my mentor. He's screaming through the phone. Apparently, the butterfly girl went and left a 1-star review at the shop on Google after her experience with me. He said I had disgraced the name of his shop and the other artists that worked there. I had to come in that day and apologize to each of them personally for damaging their reputations. I then had to contact the client and apologize once again to her and offer her another free tattoo. She never responded. The whole experience was humiliating. I've been told by other tattoo artists that my mentor is mostly the one to blame for this whole situation, and that I'd been set up to fail, but I still feel so awful about what I did to that poor girl's arm. I should have known I was just too exhausted to keep working. I should have called that other artist over much sooner to fix my work before I made it worse. I should have done a lot of things differently, but at least I learned from it, I guess. Anyway, I hate tattooing butterflies now. But if you at least like these stories, butterflies or not, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video, and thanks for hanging with me on this one.